Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to a brand new video. Now today I'm sharing 3 different card making projects with a bunch of tips, tricks, and life hacks to really step up and amplify your die cuts, and one of them is going to be using my brand new Lunar Paste, which is super shiny and exciting. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I'm starting off with this seafloor background stamp from my Simon Hurley Create collection, and I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to be stamping down using a little bit of my Lunar Paste. Now this is pretty easy to do. I just take it on a blending tool, and then any excess I kind of put in the top part of the lid, and then I'm able to just pounce this all over the surface of my background stamp to kind of ink it up almost like I would with an ink. It's similar to kind of like a paint-like consistency, so I could just tap it all over until I get a really nice coverage of the Lunar Paste, and here I'm using the slippery and wet color. Then I'm going to lay down my stark white cardstock, and to give some good pressure, I'm grabbing this Debbie tool. There's a lot of different kind of stamping tools on the market to give good pressure for your MISTI, but I like to also use this to give good pressure for my background stamps too, to make sure that everything stamps really nicely. So that's going to transfer that Lunar Paste beautifully, and when I peel it off here, you can see that really awesome background, and as that dries, it's going to give even more shine. Now to clean off my Lunar Paste, I do it pretty quickly right after, and I kind of flood the stamp with a little bit of water there to make sure it's not going to dry, and that also helps to really easily wipe it off of the stamp surface. Now once that background is dry, it's pretty quick because of how thin of the layer of the paste it is. I'm able to go in and do a little bit of inking. Now unlike some pastes, this is going to resist the ink, and the ink is not going to affect the paste's shine or anything like that. So I'm going in with a little bit of Breakup Blue, some Clear Skies, and then a little bit of Midnight Snack, just because I wanted to have a little bit of variation in the blues, but I'm creating kind of an underwater scene, just giving it some depth and dimension with several colors of my blue colors. So once I'm done ink blending those on with my domed blending tools, I'm going to kind of show you that beautiful background. You can see all that awesome shine from just stamping with the Lunar Paste. It really is super versatile, and I love that you can ink it up like that. So once that's all complete, I'm going to add it down onto a top folding card base. That's my background there. And then let's start working on the centerpiece. I'm going to use the GRACEFUL Jellyfish die from Memory Box. And of course you can kind of twist these and bend them or use a wire cutter to split them apart. But for most of the dies in today's video, I just kept them together because it's really easily able to cut out all those pieces at once then. So I'm just cutting them out of some stark white cardstock. This is one of my kind of hacks. I don't love to use colored cardstock or anything like that. In fact, I don't have much colored cardstock in my stash, because instead I like to go in for my ink pads, which I already have invested in, and then go in and ink blend my cardstock to get some different tones on it and color it however I want to match my project. Here I'm going in with a little bit of traffic cone and pouncing that on, and I'm also able to add several colors, so I added a little bit of bee sting for some depth and dimension. Now for these top parts of the jellyfish, again, I'm going to use a little bit of paste this time to color them in. I'm using my ink blending tools and just applying a little bit of that slippery and wet paste. Then I'll go in with my heated craft tool, heat set that for just a couple seconds. I wanted to show you. It's already dry then after that. And then I can go and add several layers. So here I added a little bit more slippery and wet, and then I'm able to dry it in between. And then for a little bit of shading in depth and dimension, I added some traffic cone on top to kind of the top portions of those jellyfish. And then I'm able to dry it and layer that up as well for a little bit more shading. I love kind of doing this with the Lunar Pastes and just using those sponges to apply them down. Then I added that right on top of those jellyfish to add that sparkly top to them, and then I'm able to adhere them down onto my card. I used a little bit of foam tape, and then I just adhered some of the kind of tentacles down using some liquid glue onto the surface. So then I just added a hello sentiment to finish it off. I love how this turned out, how we got the shine going on the jellyfish and the background, and that's why I love die cutting on a white cardstock, because I was able to color it however I wanted. Now for my next card, I'm able to go in with the Coral Collage, and this comes with kind of a collage background and then also a piece of coral by itself. So here I lined this up right in the center of my stark white cardstock, and then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine, and I really love how this one turns out. It creates this kind of cool window that you have with a couple different bubbles and also the pieces of coral at the bottom. And then I was also able to take that piece of coral and run it through my die cutting machine several times to get a few more pieces that I'm able to then build up the background with. So I love that it comes with those two pieces to kind of create a scene. Now, this is, again, why I love cutting out of the white cardstock. I'm able to go in with the traffic cone ink and the little detail ink blender and just color in those little pieces of coral at the bottom. So I was able to add a little bit of color on those and make them stand out from the rest of the background instead of just leaving it white. And then I also went in with a little bit of bee sting to again add a little bit more depth and dimension to the coloring and give it a little bit of shading onto there. I love these detail blending tools. They're really a lifesaver at getting into those small spaces. Now for these big pieces of coral, I wanted to give them a little bit of shine again. So here I went in with a little bit of that traffic cone lunar paste. And I always do this on kind of a piece of plastic or a craft sheet. And then I'm able to just kind of clean it up easily afterwards. And I'm just going to pounce that onto the surface of those coral pieces. This is a really super fast way to color these in, and then it'll give it some really beautiful shine at the end as well. Now the nice part about this is, again, by adding that little thin layer on, I can go in with my heat tool, dry it for about 10 seconds, and it's going to be dry and ready for another layer. So I'm able to layer up a couple different colors of those pastes if I want to. Here I added a little bit of bee sting towards the bottom of them for a little bit of shading, and again, both of those colors are going to be super nice and shiny. And I love kind of mixing some ink and then some lunar paste on different backgrounds and elements of the card. That way the shine will kind of stand out, but then you have some that are just normal inked colors. So here I'm adding a little bit of adhesive onto the back of that background, and this is going to allow me to just stick those pieces of coral in there. So I kind of added one at the bottom there, and then I'm going to add one kind of from the top right corner peeking in and at the background. So again, those are going to shine, and the other coral pieces are just made with colored ink. Now for the background here, since we have that window, I wanted to create my own colored cardstock. So I went in with a little bit of that breakup blue, and I covered the whole background with this solid color. Now here I'm using the domed ink blending tools. I pretty much switched exclusively to these for just inks. For the pastes I used the flat ones still, but I like these for the inks because it makes it so you have no harsh edges at all, and it makes it super easy to blend backgrounds like this. So after I'm done blending the first color, I went in with a little bit of Remember Me and Midnight Snack, again just for some variation in the background. This is why I like to just use inks instead of just a solid colored cardstock. It adds a lot more interest to the backgrounds that you're able to create. So then after that, I'm going to go in and spray that with a little bit of water to add some bubbles because it's going to react and kind of lift off that color to give it a little bit more texture and interest for the water. So once I'm done with that, I'll add my top background on some foam tape. And I always like to start at the top edge of the card base and then work my way down to kind of line it up really easily. So once my background is completely finished, I'm able to move on to the fish. So here I'm using the School of Fish die from Memory Box. This one's kind of a big cluster of fish that cuts out all as a group. And again, this is another great example of just cutting it out of a white cardstock. It saves lots of time, and instead of running it through with several different colors, I'm able to then just go in with my blending tools and color them in a matter of seconds. Here, for this first one, I went in with some yellows and oranges, and I'm able to add some shading really easily onto there as well. For the next fish, I did, I think, greens and blues here. I added a little bit of Psych and then Clear Skies and Midnight Snack to the back of it. So these are super easy to color in. And again, even as small as they are, I was able to add shading. And I love adding that depth and dimension to it rather than just using a solid sheet of cardstock and running that through several times. This saved me a lot of time and also gives me lots of dimension to the card. Now I wanted to add a little bit more detail to these fish, so I went in with my Lunar Paste again on my blending tool and just kind of rubbed that onto the surface there. I didn't want to make it too thick that it would cover up those colors, but it just added a little bit of that golden shine, so when I tip this in the light, you'll be able to see it really easily, and it really stands out beautifully. Once those fish are all colored in, I'm able to add a little bit of foam tape onto the back of them and place them down kind of swimming around inside of our bubble background there. So just making them kind of stand out using a little bit of foam tape. Now I'm going to go in with the Mythical Mermaid stamp set. I like the sentiments for this, and one says "Have a fantastic day," which I thought would be absolutely perfect for this. So I stamped it down onto some stark white cardstock and using some jet black archival ink to make it stand out. And then I cut it down into a strip, and I actually ended up cutting the sentiment into 2 strips. So I split up the "Have a" and "Fantastic Day" and added those down on some foam tape. So that finishes off the card beautifully. Again, using that white cardstock really helps, and I love the different elements of shine that we added with the Lunar Paste and then just the flat ink. This card turned out so fun. So for the last card here, I'm going to use the Grand Tulip Shell die. This has a solid shell that you're able to cut out that matches, and then the detailed version of it as well, which is going to help us kind of create a stencil here. I hope you'll understand it. So I ended up cutting out the solid and detailed version of the shell here. For the detailed version, I'm going to take it and place it back into the area that we cut it out of the cardstock, and I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape to tape it down there. I just taped the edges so that cut line all around the edge is kind of seamed together and nothing will bleed through there. This kind of helps stiffen it and make it a nice stencil that we're able to use because it's got all of those inside detail areas of the shell. So then after I've taped that all down, I'm going to then use the other thing that we cut out the solid shell from. Those actually kind of match up, and I'm able to tape that onto the back of the stencil that we just created. This will make it so that we're easily able to place the die cut inside of there when we want to go do our stenciling. So I'm going to end up using some pixie spray. I ended up trying it before this without the pixie spray and it moved around a little too much. So letting that pixie spray dry will help kind of stick things down with a little bit of repositionable adhesive. Then I'm taking the shell that we cut out, this is the solid version, and sticking it inside of there. Now I'm able to go through this with the shell die cut in the back and this detailed version over top of it, and I'm using my Lunar Paste to go right through the stencil. Here I'm using a little bit of that slippery when wet color, and I'm just kind of smoothing this over top of the whole thing. I actually ended up kind of making it have a little bit of texture in it by going back and forth with my palette knife. I thought some texture would add some interest to these larger open areas. And I also went in to do a little bit of shading, so I brought in a little bit of traffic cone on some of the edges to just bring in a little bit of orange from that right side there and blending it out into that slipper when wet color. So once I have fully completed that, I'm going to peel this back out of my stencil there that we created. You could totally keep that and use that for more, but then I'm going to set it off to the side and let it dry. Here I'm going to create a background using my stamping foam, so I'm going to heat that for about 15 seconds and then place it down and press it into the Jewel Heist background stamp. This is another fun one from my Simon Hurley Create line. Now once I'm done with that, I'm going to ink this up. I swipe my ink across the surface, and I've been obsessed with kind of making the lighter color in the center and then doing a fade to darker colors on the outside. So I used a little bit of breakup blue, some clear skies around the edge, and then midnight snack around the very close edge there. Once I'm done, I'm going to spray it down with a little bit of water and then stamp it down onto my stark white cardstock, and that created a really beautifully stamped background. This stamping foam will be back in stock in a couple months here. And then I added everything down onto my surface, and there we have that beautifully shiny shell once it's all complete. I love that shine of the Lunar Paste and how we were able to create our own stencil with those 2 die cuts, and I finished it off with a sentiment from that same Mythical Mermaid stamp set. Alright guys, I hope you really enjoyed that video as much as I loved creating it. Be sure to leave a comment down below letting me know which of the 3 cards were your favorite. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and click that subscribe button down below so you never miss another card making and crafting video like this one from me. Alright guys, I'll see you very, very soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye!